Right now, you think you're awake. You're reading this. You're aware. You're present. But neuroscientists have a term for what most humans experience as waking life. They call it the default mode. And what they found inside it will make you question every decision you've ever made, every thought you've ever had, and every moment you thought you were actually living. You have never been as awake as you think you are, and the proof has been sitting inside your own brain the whole time. In 2001, a neuroscientist named Marcus Reichel made a discovery nobody expected. He was running brain scans at Washington University in St. Louis. The experiment was simple. Give a person a task. Watch which parts of the brain light up. But Reichel noticed something strange. When the task stopped, when the person was doing absolutely nothing, a specific network of brain regions didn't go quiet. They got louder. He called it the default mode network, and what it does will disturb you. The default mode network is the part of your brain that runs when you are not doing anything in particular. It is your brain's idle state, but it is not resting. It is working harder than almost any other mental state you experience. It is replaying your past, simulating your future, constructing and reconstructing your sense of who you are. It is, in a very literal sense, the voice inside your head. And here is the problem. Studies show that the average human spends 46.9% of their waking hours not thinking about what they are actually doing. Nearly half your life. Your eyes are open, you are physically present, but your brain has left the building, but a wandering mind is just the beginning. What scientists found underneath it is far stranger. In 2006, researchers at Duke University published a study on human behavior. They wanted to know how much of what humans do is actually chosen. The answer was 45%. Nearly half of everything you do every single day is not a decision. It is a habit running on autopilot. The route you take to work, the way you brush your teeth, what you reach for when you open the fridge, the tone you use with people you're closest to, you did not choose any of it in the moment. Your brain chose it weeks, months, or years ago and locked it in, because your brain is not designed to be conscious. It is designed to be efficient. Consciousness is expensive. It burns enormous amounts of energy. So your brain does something clever. It takes any behavior you repeat more than a few times and moves it out of conscious control entirely, into a structure called the basal ganglia. The basal ganglia does not think. It does not weigh options. It does not care what you want your life to look like. It simply fires the pattern it was given. And once a behavior moves there, once it becomes a habit, you almost never get it back into conscious control. Not without enormous effort. Not without the kind of awareness that most people never develop. But here is where it gets truly unsettling. It is not just your actions running on autopilot, it is your thoughts. In 2005, the National Science Foundation published an analysis of human thought patterns. The average person has between 12,000 and 60,000 thoughts per day. Of those, 95% are exactly the same thoughts they had yesterday. And of those repeated thoughts, 80% are negative. Read that again. Your brain is running the same mental loops every single day. The same worries, the same self-criticisms, the same replayed conversations, the same imagined futures that never arrive. You did not generate those thoughts consciously. They generated themselves. This is what neuroscientists call automatic thinking, thought that arises not from deliberate conscious choice, but from deeply worn neural pathways grooves, carved so deep by repetition that the brain slides into them the moment attention relaxes. And attention relaxes constantly. Remember, 46.9% of your waking hours. Here's the part that changes everything. In 2010, Harvard psychologists Matthew Killingsworth and Daniel Gilbert published a study called A Wandering Mind is an Unhappy Mind. They tracked 2,250 people throughout their days using a smartphone app that randomly checked in and asked 3 questions. What are you doing right now? What are you thinking about right now? How happy are you right now? The result was unambiguous. People were significantly less happy when their minds were wandering than when they were focused, regardless of what they were actually doing. Even doing something unpleasant with full attention made people happier than doing something pleasant while mentally absent. Being present was not just philosophically meaningful, it was the single strongest predictor of moment-to-moment happiness they found in the entire study. And most people almost never do it. But if all of this is happening automatically, the habits, the thought loops, the wandering, then who exactly is in control? The answer is one of the most uncomfortable things science has ever produced. In 1983, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet ran an experiment that has been disturbing people ever since. He asked volunteers to flex their wrist whenever they felt like it. Simple enough, but he also wired them up to measure 2 things simultaneously: the electrical activity in their brain and the exact moment they became consciously aware of deciding to move. What he found shattered a fundamental assumption about what it means to be a conscious being. The brain began preparing the movement 550 milliseconds before the person moved. That is not the disturbing part. The disturbing part is this: the person became consciously aware of deciding to move 200 milliseconds before they moved. which means the brain had already made the decision 350 milliseconds before the person knew they had decided anything. The conscious experience of choosing came after the brain had already chosen. You were not the one who decided. You were informed of the decision. Neuroscientist Sam Harris described it this way: your conscious mind is less like the driver of a car and more like a passenger who occasionally thinks they are steering. You experience the decisions your brain has already made and call them your own. You experience the thoughts your neural pathways generate and call them your opinions. You experience the habits your basal ganglia executes and call them your personality. And then you spend your entire life defending that constructed self as if it were something real. But here's what nobody tells you. This is not a reason to despair. It is an instruction manual. In the 1970s, a biologist named John Kabat-Zinn was studying meditation at MIT. He noticed something that Western science had almost entirely ignored. Certain people, meditators, specifically showed measurably different brain activity than average. Their default mode networks were quieter. Not silent, but quieter. The voice was still there, but it had lost some of its grip. Kabat-Zinn spent the next decade building a clinical program to test whether ordinary people, not monks, not spiritual seekers, could learn to do the same thing. The results were published and replicated dozens of times across the following decades. 8 weeks of mindfulness practice measurably reduced default mode network activity. 8 weeks. People reported fewer intrusive thoughts, less anxiety, stronger focus, a greater sense that they were actually present in their own lives. Brain scans confirmed it. The grooves were still there. The pathways were still carved, but the brain had grown new tissue in the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for conscious attention and deliberate choice, measurably thicker than before. You can literally grow the part of your brain that makes you more awake. And here is the thing that most people never hear about any of this. The ancient traditions that developed meditation thousands of years ago did not call it relaxation. They called it waking up, not metaphorically, literally. They understood something that neuroscience spent the 20th century rediscovering, that the default state of the human mind is a kind of sleep, and that becoming actually conscious, actually present, is not a passive experience. It is something you have to choose, repeatedly. Against the pull of 300,000 years of efficient automatic wiring, right now, you think you're awake. And in the most basic biological sense, you are. Your eyes are open, your brain is processing, your heart is beating. But 46.9% of the time your mind is somewhere else entirely. 45% of what you do today will not be chosen. It will simply happen. 95% of what you think today you thought yesterday. And the decisions you believe you are making consciously are, in many cases, already made before you know you made them. This is not a flaw. It is what your brain was built to do. But built for is not the same as condemned to. Every moment you actually notice where you are, what you're doing, what you're thinking, who you are with, you are doing something genuinely rare, something that most humans across most of history almost never did. You are waking up, not for the first time, for one of the very few times today, and the question is not whether you can stay awake forever. The question is whether you can notice, just a little more often, that you were asleep.